night the war was declared, the man comes to the door at 2 in the morning, 1 or 2 in the morning, and says, "You are arrested. Get on that motorcycle." And we got up the next morning. "Where's Foggy?" "Oh, he's gone." "Why is he gone?" "He was supposed to be home." Well, they came and got him, and now I couldn't. We went.
What was he doing for a career at that point?
He was selling slate.
Oh, okay.
So.
From the Vatchek mine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we just found out that they now mine the slate in Portugal, which is way inferior under the same name. What a cheating bunch.
You mean the Vatcheks?
Yeah. Vatchek slate mines in Portugal. They bought them and they put the name on it, and they talked to Uncle Albert, and he signed papers. He got all kinds of goodies out of it that they could use a name. I would like to protest that decision. And they thought the mines were going to be empty by now, and they found out they have another 200 years worth. It is the best slate in the world. And don't ask me. My father sat down once and qualified it for me, but he said they have a certain amount of.
So he was working in the family business.
Yeah. So did my grandfather. They took us in the mines.
Your grandfather he died towards. You told the story of when you and Sonia pulled him in a wagon, right? From one place.
No, we slid. No, he was in Eppenhain, and it was on the mountain, and he came to visit us in the occupation camp.
That's right.
And my parents couldn't visit us because my father was heaven knows where, and my mother was across the river. There were no more bridges, and we cried every time everybody's parents came except ours. And then the soldiers came forward and said,
"Wait, so everyone else had at least one parent come to visit them except for
yes.
you and Sonia?"
Yeah.
Well, that is a little depressing.
It was usually the mother, of course, because the two girls had a father who was too old to be drafted until the end. In the end, they drafted him up to 65. And they called them the Volkssturm. And I don't know how they call them the Volk, is I don't know. I should have. Yeah, the people's. I don't know what you say. Translate for Sturm, because Sturmen is to run in advance, something. Storm can be a weather-related thing, like a storm.
Yeah. But
Stürmer is also an advanced person in the military. So they call it the Volkssturm. They were up to usually 60 to 65. Okay. And they used to tell jokes.
I feel like your dad.
Yeah. There was this joke that you are not supposed to do openly, but when nobody was looking, they told this joke and said, "The Volkssturm is the most valuable part of our troops." And the people would say, "Why?" "Well, they have gold in their mouth, silver in their head, and lead in their legs." But Sonia had a boyfriend once, and I really felt bad for him. He was.
Wait, she had a boyfriend during the war?
No, well, later, when she had a boyfriend, after the war, she met this guy, I don't know where. She dated him, and he said he had no family. And then one day we asked him, because he was living with two old aunts, and I said, "What happened here?" So he told Sonia, they drafted also the 16 to 18-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And so he was drafted, and he was an auxiliary troop in the Breslau, which was being bombed heavily. So he was drafted to make up big walls, shore up the soil because the Russians were coming. So he was on the outskirts of Breslau, and then he said, "Well, I better go home and see what my parents are doing in between areas." You want to go sleep? You have heard all these stories. So
no, I'm fascinated.
So he went back to the house. That story really made me cry. And they had come in planes had come in two layers. The first layer, they came with the phosphor bombs, set the houses on fire. And then when the people were out extinguishing it, trying to get rid of the fire, they came back with explosives and flattened them with their houses. And I remember those phosphor bombs. I saw a few. And so he said, "Where are my parents?" And guy there, the other guy from the Volksturm said, "Oh, go over there in the park." He said, "What are you doing in the park?"
Yeah, I'm gonna lay down, maybe if I get up, we'll play a game or something later.
So he said, "When
Thanks for great dinner. Love it.
yeah,
No problem.
I'm glad you're doing it." But today I'm not very active. But actually my knee is worse today than I don't know why. So anyway, so he said, "What are my parents doing over there?" "Oh no, they're not doing anything. That's 200 bodies over there we're burning. We can't bury them. We have to burn them because we have the danger of infections and it's a health hazard to leave the bodies there. There's no way we can bury them."
Right.
So then he had,
His parents had died.
they got, I don't know, you don't want to ask the person in detail like that.
No.
He was so affected by that. I could see his whole personality. He was always, he needed a lot of care and love. And he came to visit us because he was living with two old aunts who were very nice to him, but they were not like a family. Anyway, so then he didn't know who his brother was. He was on the Eastern Front, Russian front, and of course he was only 16. Well, how would he know to go about looking for him? But anyway, and then after he evacuated with his two aunts, they got a notice that he was killed in the war in Russia, so he had nobody. And I had one classmate in the evacuation camp. We had the A class on that side and the B class on that side. We were in the former country. It was like a country home the school had bought. And every school class, still in today, one period of the year, 11 days, the whole class goes to a vacation somewhere. Sometimes today they go to youth hostels, and they do all kinds of cultural stuff. And it's part of the school program. And it doesn't cost anything, And we were on that side, but that time we were there to be evacuated. We couldn't go back home. And these girls were on that side, and that was actually a restaurant and hotel. They confiscated the hotel for the other class. And then 3 teachers, or 4 teachers, I don't know how many were on the other side. We had 3 teachers that were doing everything, and then we had a housekeeper and his wife, and that was it. And only once a month could the parents come on Sundays, but ours never came because my father was at the front and my mother was way over somewhere. And she had Monica, who was too little to do a lot of traveling. So anyway, one girl, Hannelore Dobler, I'll never forget her name. She was one of 4 kids, and she was the only one there. And her mother with the other siblings was in Frankfurt, and they all got killed in one night.
Oh.
Oh my goodness.
So then the father got furlough from the Russian front to bury his family. And Hannelore was just devastated. And then her father went back and got killed. So her grandparents took over. Then they came to visit her, and there was no train station. You had to go to the train station and walk an hour up the hill. So they came, and her grandfather stepped on a bomb and lost his leg.
Oh my word.
And I always thought, how is she going to survive? She has so much. I get goosebumps remembering Hannelore just never stopped crying. She couldn't go to school anymore. Oh, my little sister and brother. And the teachers were pretty helpless. I thought at the times they were cruel, but I thought they were still helpless. What do you do? What do you say? They didn't have saplines,
Yeah.
So, and just a year ago, we were talking about some people that knew all these kids out there. Once in a while, I stumble into somebody who says, "Yeah, I remember Hannelore Dobler." I said, "Yeah, what happened to her?" She got married, had 2 kids, and then committed suicide. But I could see that some kids, it was so interesting. One classmate, Sabine, she wound up marrying an American and died from cancer in America. But her father was the high officer. When he came to visit, he had the red stripes down the pants. So we were adequately respectful. And her mother was from Switzerland, and she was a very brave lady. she was trying to be, she was so cheerful, she fooled me completely. She had one big sister who was much older. But the one thing I know, all of a sudden, Frankfurt was being bombed more and more because the German army resisted. And he said, I'm the commander. This city is not going to be bombed to shreds. It's bad enough. I am not going to defend Frankfurt. Next time he came to visit, first we heard nothing. She didn't have any communication or anything. The next thing he came to visit, he was civis.
They stripped him of all his high ranking.
And of course, the mother being Swiss, she didn't do anything. She wanted to be able to go to Switzerland and see her family, you know. And her older sister, I don't know what happened to her, but she went here and she was so poor in America that one of the other classmates put her up every time she came to Frankfurt. And unfortunately, when they had that meeting, I was already in America, you know. If I'd known that, I might have gone over there. I would have liked to talk to them, because when we were in Eppenheim, that was where they evacuated, but it was air raid. We went to the basement. If anything had happened in that town, but that was a wooden house, and the basement was 10 feet above the ground. And we sat there, and that house rattled. And I remember we were knitting, and the lights went out, and I kept knitting because mittens, you go around and around, doesn't matter, you know. And I kept saying prayers. And then I discovered one of the teachers there was painting our principal. He was married, had 4 kids, and he was, if you want to see a Nazi, he was it. He was a history teacher.
Principal.
Yeah. He was a bald-faced guy, ugly as sin, and he forced us every time we passed the teacher in the school. Before we got there, he had to do Heil Hitler. We got so tired of it, but we didn't dare do anything. He was so loud. He was freed from military service because he was a propaganda speaker for Goebbels. That we found out later. We didn't know at the time, but boy, since he told me history, I hated it. I hated it. It was all so boring, nothing but propaganda, but you know, we knew enough.
So he was the principal and history teacher?
Yeah, he in the school before we got evacuated.
Another teacher.
Yeah, before we went evacuated, he was the principal history teacher, and the female teacher was with us. And we said, "What's Mr. Gabber doing in this town?" Oh, we saw him sneaking around the forest. You know, how kids get a kick out of it. Oh, there's something going on, and they're not picking raspberries. But he was. I was scared of the man. I was really scared. I always wondered
what grade were you in?
We were 14, 13, we were 12. I don't relate this to grades too much, just to age, you know.
That's fine.
In the time of the war, and we don't know what, you know, some of these people, we like that Gimbel guy. I would have loved to be there in court, except it was difficult. Because I met his older son, Hermann was his. Yeah, Hermann, and the younger was Fritz. I met him, and he was very nice, and I just, because the boys were always so nice, and the mother was so nice, I think I would have had a real conflict to go into court, because those boys... Like
the Nuremberg trials or something?
Well, you know, see, the whole neighborhood was evacuated, because when the Americans came. Nobody knew where they went. If any of the neighbors had gone into court, I don't know what would happen. We were away from Frankfurt. I don't know what happened to me. Someday I'll find out. Maybe, you know. But it bothered me because the wife, she said, I'm taking my boys to church, and many times they walk with us. Oh, Frau Gimbel, you want to go to church with us tomorrow? And their house was here, ours was there, and we had to go down this way and that way to go to church. And she was very nice, and we went to play with those boys, and they had the most fantastic toys because Hermann Göring sent them to prison. You know, kids like stuff, you know, and they don't think political. I remember that, and she was always, we never talked about even any events.
And why did Göring send them gifts?
He was the godfather.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah. So, but you know, as a kid, you don't put anything together. And sometimes it slides by those boys that were in the Napola when they first wore the uniform. I said, what kind of, you said Arbeitsdienst, you know, that the German men were all drafted into Arbeitsdienst, which means they had to do 1 year of service. And the Frankfurt-Darmstadt Autobahn was built by the Arbeitsdienst. And it got those kids off the street. Before the war, there were so many unemployed young kids because they went down with their education. And the girls had to do 1 year either on a farm or work in a family that had at least 3 children. So we had one of those, Pflichtjahr-Mädchen, young girl. She was really nice because she loved my sister with her curls. She curled her up, and everybody said, now you have Shirley Temple in the house. And we were so tickled to walk with that little sister. Everybody stopped.
You guys were watching Shirley Temple movies in Germany?
Well, we had no movies. We didn't even have radio. My father said, do you want to make music? You make it yourself. You want music? You make it yourself. He will not buy it. We played piano, violin, we had house concerts. That was it. He would not have a radio. Then comes the war. You had to have a radio. Because...
Did Opie play an instrument himself?
No, but he wanted everybody else to play one.
Your mom was the piano teacher.
No, she wasn't the teacher. She played the piano. She had a beautiful voice. And when after the First World War, they had the occupation in Mayen in their house. But the occupation then was much nicer because they came and said, we want you to rent a room or give us a room, let an officer sleep there. And that Villa Eickhoff in Mayen was big. They had 2 of them there. And then some neighboring that had nice homes, some of them, not in apartments. If you had a house.
Were they U.S. officers?
Yes. And they got a...
There was more than that in the World War I, so I didn't know if there was...
Yeah, they got along fabulously. Of course, my grandmother's household, for one, was always very hospitable. I mean, I cannot remember when it wasn't. And my grandmother said, and of course she was already widowed. My grandfather died before I was born. And
Your grandfather on your mom's side?
Yeah.
Because the other one was alive when you were...
Yeah, I only had one grandfather that I knew. You know, he lived with us. So what was interesting?
And he was doing the night watchman thing.
During World War II. Yes.
What?
He was the warden.
Yeah.
He was the warden, you know. Night watchman, that's funny. When I think about night watchman, I think about that painting by Rembrandt. So anyway, it got me off the track. So they really got along, and because there was no radio, the Germans were not allowed to have radios after the First World War. And what they would do is the young people, my father and my mother, my father was actually a friend of her brother. That's how that's the only way they met guys in those days. And they went on the Katzenberg, which is where the slave mines were. And there was still the house where my father grew up part of the time. They later moved to Cologne. And they would congregate there and listen to the radio secretly because the Germans had been barred from having radios. So that's the only kind of radio they had.
By law they were barred? Why were they barred?
Well, you know, read all about the Versailles Contract. I don't know. The left side of the Rhine River was all deprived.
So your dad told you these stories then?
He wasn't the only one. Some other people commented on it in Mayan. They said, yeah, when we couldn't even have a radio. No. But so they said, okay, my mother played the piano. And they were 3 girls and their 2 brothers, and the 3 girls were always entertaining the people, singing together and whatnot, and it was so fantastic, such a fantastic relationship. 2 guys after the Second World War sent us care packages. They figured out they sent a letter to Mayen, and the Eickhoffs were still the name Eickhoff was still on the mailbox. And the third one was a captain in the First World War. He came back after the Second World War. He was a colonel. He was stationed somewhere for a short time because he only came once. The only problem was my Uncle Emil who had married my Tante Billa. who he had been sweet on. So Uncle Emil hated Americans because he was an officer, and when he got into captivity, and he was the
officer in the Second World War.
Yeah, he was an officer in the First World War.
Emil was?
Yeah, he tell you he was in Russia. He told us how they had nothing to eat, nothing to put on the Christmas tree, so they put Ariel on the Christmas tree. And he said they had such problems with mice. They would hang all their clothes out in the bitter cold at night, hoping the next morning they would be gone. And they were dead when they brought them in, and the minute they warmed up, they were alive again. And how hungry they were. He said, I don't remember all the stuff he told me about what they ate was incredible. And later he didn't want to talk about it, but he was drafted, even though he was too old.
Well, he suffered dementia at the end of his life, didn't he?
At the end, yeah. And when he died, he had a basement full of string and stuff that you saved during the war. He saved every piece of string, every piece of paper.
Why don't you say there were cigar butts and stuff around different places?
I don't remember that.
Refrigerator or something?
No, the electric bulbs were in the refrigerator, yeah. It was kind of sad. He was a very smart man and kind of a quiet man. And when they sent him to France, he was in charge of because they wouldn't send him to fight, so he was in charge of the transportation.
Why wouldn't they send him to fight?
Second World War, he's probably too old.
He was too old. Yeah, so when they sent him to France, and he was the boss of a whole transportation system, and they threw the French out, and he said, you're not throwing these people out. He went to his commanding officer and said, there's no need. I don't need a house. And so they said, what do you propose? He said, just give me a bedroom. And that's what they did. And those French people wrote him a letter after the war. They found out where he was. I mean, I don't know what happened to the letter or anything. I would have loved it because they were so grateful. They came over and they were very grateful. We talked to him. But they were very careful. They couldn't do it more than once, because if you were a Frenchman and you collaborated with the Germans, and were nice to Germans in any which way, they shore the girls, if they ever talked to Germans, they shore all their head, and then they had to go live in if you saw a girl in France with a babushka, you knew what had happened. It was Norway, they did that too. I mean, it was really, and a few other things, So he didn't have any contact. Also, he didn't know English. French, he didn't know French, Mm-hmm. But he was actually a surveyor. And he is one of the few people that had a university title, So he made very good money ultimately, And unfortunately, he never had kids. He was the best guy for kids, But the only thing I could see he hated the Americans, the purple passion. And later on, I asked Tante Billa, I asked her at a time when things had kind of settled down overall, and I waited for him not to be there. And she said he went into captivity and they hauled him off to Marseille, and they had these Americans there. They had mostly officers, and they were really horrible. And they found out later that he was a Jewish guy, and they whipped. His whole dignity was destroyed. They whipped him like little boys, and he hadn't done anything against the Jews. He was just a soldier doing what he had to do. Yeah. And he told me once that he didn't like to be in Russia. Yes, because it was horrible living circumstances. But what he didn't like is that he was supposed to kill other people. Mm-hmm. But he never talked much about it. He was kind of a quiet person anyway. And when he talked about it, he just said that's the way it was. And he didn't say, it bothers me or something. He wouldn't, but you could tell. In fact, he never talked, after a while, he didn't talk about the war or anything like that, because I think it was just something that bothered him too much. It was such a miracle. My father was one of 5 boys.
Would you like some chocolate cake?
No, thank you. But you can eat it. It doesn't matter.
I know, I will eat it.
And what was amazing, the oldest, Edgar, he went to New York, and the others were all in the military. Not one of them was even injured. And the two in-laws, same thing. 7 people in the military. I mean, it was such a stroke of luck. And my Uncle Heinz, the banker, I think maybe Mark might have, he was...
Oh, I met him enough a lot. He's the one about the South with Chocolate old thing.
Is he the one that, the banker?
I just know he brought chocolate. He and, was it Inga?
He and who?
Inga?
No, that was Uncle Walter.
Oh, okay.
I'll take a tiny slice just to taste it. So, but you know, that was a miracle. But you know, my father was in captivity, and he was only, my father and my mother's brother deserted. My father said, I've had enough of this war. I'm not going back to my unit. He was supposed to go to Munich. He said, I'll never get there alive. Because he got across on the Rhine Bridge and he saw the Nazis fighting the non-Nazis. Are you making coffee too? Or whatever.
Getting a little chilled.
That's because you're tired, probably.
Yeah.
And so, okay, that's good, just a little bit. So, I should get Sonia to give me that poem that my father wrote about his captivity. Not bad, not bad. Is that a great? Oh, I see.